Hello and welcome to Round Robin. I'm your host, Robin McCormick with the City of Hampton's Communications and Marketing Department. And today we're going to talk a little bit more about bullying. We've brought back guest Alvean Lyons, one of our family experts, and we're going to talk about bullying, particularly with middle school children. So welcome back.
Good morning. Thank you.
This is such an important topic. Parents really worry about this. Like, we want to protect our kids. And the older they get, the harder it gets.
You're absolutely right. I mean, it really becomes a bit more complicated when you have less of the ability to step in the way that you did. When we talked about it last time, we talked a lot about the elementary school level. And when parents have small children, they really feel like, you know, I can go to the school, I can talk to the teachers, I can call other parents.
I'm more likely to know those parents and
I can do
interact
something.
with them.
Absolutely. I feel more like I can do something when my kids are little. But as the kids develop and they start to forge their own independence, we really struggle with how much should we get involved? How should we get involved? What are the boundaries? How independent do I help my child, operate in situations like that? It is a very challenging issue, very.
Mm-hmm. So what does bullying look like in the middle school years?
Okay, so middle school is one of the more complex phases. Okay?
It is because they start out looking like little kids.
They do.
And then all of a sudden they're, giant grown-up humans.
Bigger than us.
They have, beards and stuff.
Facial hair, right.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot does change, right? And it's the biggest change that we tend to see because we are going from our babies into our young men or our little girls into our young women. Mm-hmm. So it is a little complex, and it's complex emotionally as well, because they're trying to sort out who they are, and the hormones are all over the place, and trying to figure out, on some level you want to lean on mommy and daddy the way that you used to, but you know that you're older, so you tend to not let yourself do that. So it is a complicated space. So when you get to the middle school level, the bullying looks a little bit different than it does in elementary school. In elementary, we see like the very typical stuff. I'm pulling your hair, I'm pulling the chair out from underneath you. Very simple kinds of things. Not any less painful for kids. Right. But in terms of how obvious it is, it looks pretty clear at the elementary level. When you start to move into the middle school level, that's when we start to get into things now with the advent of social media.
Right.
You start to see things that happen on Facebook. You start to see things take place on Twitter for the kids who are a little bit more advanced. You start to see things on Pinterest, and we can kind of go down the list.
Wow.
But it really starts to spread in different kinds of ways than it did at the elementary level. So one of the important things we have to do as parents is we have to get really involved in paying attention to what our kids are doing with their technology. Because a lot of times we're not finding out until it's a little too late that things have spread, something has been said, and it's hard to pull it back once it gets out there. Mm-hmm. So really paying attention to what your kids are doing. Know the passwords. When your kids are at that age, I fundamentally believe, and I say it all the time, everything that your kids play with, utilize, touch, it's yours. It's under your household, it's under your roof, it is yours. So you should know your kids' passwords to be able to access that information. They're not at the points in their lives where they should be able to have what I consider secrets. You're too young to have secrets. We need to find out what exactly is going on. And then when we talk about it at school, that's where you start to see bullying that tends to look like, particularly for girls, the isolation. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I'm going to start to freeze you out because you're not one of us.
That emotional bullying.
Yeah, and that can be really complicated because you're not seeing overt behaviors. You are seeing covert aggression, kind of passive aggressive kinds of approaches to things. Right. So I'm not going to invite you to the party. I'm going to make sure everybody else knows except for you. We're all going to sit here and we're not going to let you sit with us. Girls tend to do emotional bullying more than they do anything else. Mm-hmm. Boys do physical bullying, where I'm shoving you into the locker, I'm knocking the books out of your hand, I'm making sure that when you come to sit down, one of the chair legs are off. You start to see different kinds of things where boys are concerned, which can be a little bit scary because it can be violent. Right. And that's when we first start to see the violence generally. Not that you can't see it in elementary school, but you're more likely to start to see it at the middle school level.
Well, you must have to respond to those things very differently, because at least the violence is encapsulated in most of the school bullying and school rules, and you can deal with it because it is direct. It's also more likely to cause physical harm, so it's in some ways kind of scarier. But the emotional bullying is hard to put your finger on.
It is.
And that makes it hard to react to.
And it becomes like a little cancer. because trying to identify where it's originating in order to be able to cut that thing out is really complicated. But the nice thing about girls is they will talk to you. Okay, so that is really helpful.
It's a foreign concept in my house.
Very different when you're raising boys.
A friend who's a girl.
Absolutely. So the nice thing is that you can have conversations with girls a little bit easier than you can where boys are concerned, because girls are less likely to be afraid to tell you how they're feeling. Boys are more likely to feel like to tell you that I'm hurt or I'm afraid is to express weakness. And socially, that's less acceptable. So boys have a tendency to stuff it more, which means we have to work differently with our sons than we do with our daughters.
Yeah, and then it's so much later. You know, it's progressed so much sometimes by the time you find
out about it. Absolutely. And the one thing that obviously every one of us want to make sure that we never are in a position to deal with is bullycide. For those who aren't familiar with the term, you're talking about suicide that is a byproduct of long-term, extensive, and painful bullying. And when kids feel like they don't have any other out, the worst thing that could possibly happen is they turn to that as a solution. And no parent wants to experience something like that, which means that we have to be very proactive in the process. And the other thing that is very important, and we chatted a little bit about that last time, is the help factor. It's not okay that you watch bullying take place. Just because it's not happening to you, and just because you're not doing the bullying, does not absolve you from the responsibility of letting somebody know if you know that someone else is being bullied. Because who wants to have that kind of regret to discover that there's something I might have been able to do and I didn't, because I didn't talk to my parents, I didn't talk to a teacher, a coach, someone that I trusted, someone in the safe zones that we talked about, that could help in the process. But we have to speak out, even for those who may or may not even be our friends.
Right. I think, you know, and that's an important cultural lesson, but it's so hard because the lack of self-esteem is kind of what is at the heart of bullying. The bully has not enough self-esteem, and so feels better by putting other people down. Or hurting other people. And those people are vulnerable. And so, you know, it's a big old mess that's hard. It's hard to give kids the tools to rise above it, or to talk about it, or to call for help.
It's true. But the thing that we have to know as parents is that there are just some basic principles that really help to minimize the possibilities of things happening that we don't know about. We may not be able to minimize the possibility of the bullying, because those are social constructs that we don't get to control. How someone else raises their kids, what they're struggling with, how they respond to that kind of struggling. We don't control those kinds of things. But what we can do is make sure that we equip our kids to know what do healthy relationships look like. When you're experiencing something that does not feel right, understand that you have the right to say something about it, and know that I am your teammate in the process. I want to know if you're experiencing something that doesn't feel comfortable for you. Give me the opportunity to either give you information that can help you navigate that space, or to advocate for you, to get involved if you feel like you're over your head. And letting kids know that you have those options. It's okay if you want to try to fix it on your own. I respect your attempts to do so. But if you're over your head, that's what we're here for. That's what mommy, daddy, auntie, uncle, friends, nana, papas, that's what we're all here for. And whichever one of us that you want to lean on in the process, we will be there for you to do that. And there's nothing wrong with needing help. Adults need help. So it's perfectly appropriate for you to need help too. So we want to make sure that our kids know that we are here for these kinds of experiences. That's what parents are here for.
And so when you talk through that, it also helps the kid figure out what they can handle on their own. And sometimes, you know, it's easier to use that as adult as a crutch. Like, maybe I don't have the self-esteem to deal with it on my own. But if you come in, then I'm relieved of having to do it, but maybe I'm a little more ready next time, or I understand how to deal with things in the future.
It's true. I mean, there are various experiences that we will have both at an adult level, that parent level, and, you know, for our teenagers as well. And in this case, we're really talking about tweens, because we're sort of in between those two stages, that really help both of us grow in the process. Because there are certain things, yes, that we may not have known how to approach until we're in the situation. And we may not have known whether or not it's appropriate for us to step in, but when you reach out, we will respond to that thing the best way we know how to. And each experience teaches us something new in terms of the process. So yeah, it's very complex, and it's kind of like an onion with all of these little layers that we have to peel back. But at the core of all of it is going to be our connection with our kids. We have to be talking to our kids about the responsibility that they have in terms of what they do where others are concerned, and certainly the responsibility that we are perfectly willing to accept in terms of us being able to advocate and support them. But that middle school age is really one of the most complex ages to deal with bullying at.
So how do you get your child to let you know what's going on, or how do you create that atmosphere that allows him or her to open up?
Well, first of all, it has to be non-judgmental. Because one of the things that happens with kids is they feel like something's wrong with them, that they're being picked on.
Right. So nobody likes me.
Right. It's
whatever.
Something, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not cool enough, something's wrong with my clothes. Most of the reasons that kids are bullied, particularly at the middle school level, are things that they have no control over.
Right. Boys, it might be size. You know, it's
Right.
easier to pick on a
Right.
smaller kid. They come in for more than their share.
Absolutely. And I have a kid who has special medical needs. It would have been very easy for someone to pick on him based on those things. But we knew that that is a possibility at that age. So very early on, very early on, we had conversations with him about, do understand that you are not responsible for the fact that you are juvenile diabetic. Do understand that if you are experiencing certain kinds of things, that is not a byproduct of there being something wrong with you. There's something wrong with people that think that it's okay to behave in that way. And there's this personal strength that you have. You have lived through death, quite literally. You have to see yourself as strong, despite some of the challenges that you may have. It's how we frame it and talk about it, so that our kids know that there is inner beauty. If perchance there's some things that they have to deal with physically, we have to make sure that they know that they're beautiful, particularly our girls, because that is a way that they're often isolated and picked on about what they look like physically, in ways that boys don't necessarily have those same kinds of experiences.
Clothing they can or can't afford.
Absolutely.
Weight is a huge issue.
Huge issue is weight. I'm so glad that you brought that up, because you may have come from a family that's genetically a bit heavier. So you don't necessarily have the teeny little pigtail look in the body and all of those things that some of your friends may have. And you feel differently about that. And because you're at that age where boys are now starting to identify who the pretty girls are differently than they did in elementary school, those are ways that girls find themselves socially isolated. So we have to make sure that our girls feel good about themselves. And that starts at home. So what it is that we're saying to our girls makes a huge difference. You can't call her plumpkin at home and think that she's going to feel good about herself at school. And we may mean it with love, but it still is planting a seed for how she sees herself. So we've got to be careful how we communicate certain kinds of things, because we want to set the most positive script for our kids that we possibly can. And when we create those environments where it's okay for you to feel good about yourself, and you know that I'm not going to judge you if somebody else isn't treating you properly, it's not something that's wrong with you that you're experiencing that, it opens the door for us to be able to have conversations about how somebody treated you today. And ask your kids on a regular basis how things are going, more than just the scores they're getting on tests, more than how they're performing in PE. Did you come in first? Did you guys win? More than the sports, ask them how they're doing. How's it going between you and such that you were hanging out with last week? Are you and Mary still cool? Do you and John still hang out? Find out those kinds of things. And if something's changed, ask why. So how come you guys don't hang out anymore? It could be something simple, but it could be something more complex, something that you may need to keep your eye on, but we won't know if we don't ask the questions.
So ask, talk, bring it up.
Absolutely.
Bring it up more than once if you don't get a response.
Be consistent about plugging in. We talked about those 3 P's before, but I'll bring it up again.
Thank you.
When we ask our kids about peak, punch. Good job. Because those pits, when you're hearing those same pits every day, there's often something wrong. If your kids are saying that I hate going to lunch every day, there's something socially wrong. It's probably not just the cafeteria food.
Right.
We may not love that, but that's something we could fix by bringing home lunch. But if they're talking about the fact that they want to avoid that, or they hate the locker rooms, or transitioning between classes they prefer not to do, those are things that are social cues that something's going on. So when we ask them those pits every day, listen to what they're saying. Is there some common thread between those? And if there is, that may mean that we need to make a phone call. We may need to communicate with the people that we called our safe zones. Are there people who are noticing stuff at school that you don't have the ability to see because you're not with your kids? So definitely plug in. And when they talk about their peaks, find out what they're enjoying, so that we can create more of those experience for them, because that social experience that comes from feeling good about yourself, that is governed by that self-esteem you pointed out earlier.
Gives you the confidence
it
and
gives
the
you the
self-esteem
confidence
to deal with
some of those other things. And then in terms of the punch, that's the social dynamics. That's when you'll find out, hey, I saw something on Instagram. Somebody posted a photo and it's gotten everywhere. And so has a picture that may not be appropriate, and I don't know if her parents know about it. Find out what's going on so that you know whether or not there's a role you can be playing in that, or whether or not there's something you could be telling your children that will help them be an asset either to themselves or to somebody else. So it's all in the connection.
Okay. So watch that middle school and look for the social issues that your kids may have.
Absolutely.
It's a tip off to the deeper undercurrent there.
Absolutely. And it's that undercurrent where all of the bullying takes place. It is rarely on the surface that you're going to see it, but middle school is that very, very delicate space that requires us to plug in more, not less, than we did at elementary.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Alvean. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. If you have a middle school kid or grandkid, I hope this has given you some insight into how to find out what's going on, help the kid deal with it, and step in when you need to. Thanks for watching.